Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I'm JP. And for those of you, if it's your first time visiting my channel, welcome. Thank you for joining. Go ahead and check out some of the previous videos, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of them. And this channel, is focused more so towards style, confidence, and I often talk a lot about, men, but, a lot of times, a lot of my episodes pertain to women as well. So women, go ahead and check out the videos as well, and like, comment, and subscribe. I really would like for you all to subscribe to the channel. I really would like to grow it, because I'll tell you today, you'll get a lot out of what I'll be talking about. A lot of times, we fall off, we get off track, but then we have to kind of figure out where we went wrong as to why we weren't consistent in the message that we were trying to deliver. So before we go any further, I'd like for you to go ahead and follow me also on my social medias. Instagram, that's jp.haney. TikTok is The Real JP Haney. And my website is jphaney.com. All right, so today we're going to talk about, and I have my notes here, so sorry if you kind of see me looking down here. We're going to talk about, motivation. The thing is, I told myself that probably a month ago that I was going to put these videos out every week. We often tell ourselves these things, especially it seems like the first of the year, whenever we make these New Year's resolutions. That's the reason why I really don't believe in New Year's resolutions. You can pick up any part of the year and say, you know what, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set this goal for myself and then just work towards it. All right. So when you talk about motivation, motivation is really an emotional thing. It's something that we say we're going to do. We tell ourselves we're motivated. I'm going to motivate myself. But really, what you need is structure. Okay. And with structure, the difference between the two is that, when you have a plan, you say you're going to go to the gym. You're going to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. You're going to go to the gym. And, you work on being consistent at that. All right. Now, with motivation, you may see somebody else. You may look on social media and see somebody posting their workouts. You may see somebody even talking about being motivated, and that motivates you. It's a feeling that you have inside. But if you're not, putting any structure in place for yourself or even making a plan for yourself, then you won't go anywhere. And so it happened to me. That happened to me. I told myself I would be consistent, and I have the content. I have the things that I want to talk to you about. But, I just couldn't really find the motivation to really, record or even, give you the content. So here I am. I'm going to do better because I'm going to structure a plan for myself, which I've already done that. Yesterday I told myself, you know what, that's it. I got to make it happen. So I told myself I'm going to get a haircut. Shout out to my barber, Orlando. He got me right. I know y'all see that tight fade. But I say, I'm going to get myself together and I'm going to deliver some content. So again, welcome. All right. So my first point, why does motivation fail? Motivation is emotional, and emotions often change. If your actions depend on your feelings, then you're going to often be inconsistent. I didn't feel like recording this video today, but here I am. So the thing is, as men and as women, we have to tell ourselves, this is what we're going to do, and you got to stick to it. It's the same as, for those of you who have a 9-to-5, who have a job, and they tell you that this is their schedule. This is the schedule, and you should stick to the schedule. You're going to be there. You're going to be on time, or else they're going to, they may write you up. You may some people get points, if you're hourly, and if you're salaried, I'm sure they'll probably, have some sort of system to hold you accountable. Well, you have to hold yourselves accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. I told myself I was going to do better, and I was going to create a plan for myself. And as I mentioned in the intro of this video, I've done just that. So I encourage you to do the same. So what does that look like? A lot of times people, they tell themselves, I don't know where to start. I want to create, fashion reels. I want to create cooking reels, gym workout reels, and then you go out there with your camera, and some of you even kind of worry about how the content actually look, how professional it is. But, if you don't, get out of your heads and just get the camera and just record the content, you'll never do it. And then we often say to ourselves, and I know I did myself, is that, I'm doing this stuff, I'm not getting paid for it, so why should I continue to do it? Well, if you're passionate enough about it and you are consistent, then, and you're doing what you love, then eventually the payouts will come. Okay. And the payouts doesn't necessarily have to be through a social media platform. The payouts can be with brand deals. It can be with somebody discovering you. But if you're not, creating structure for yourself and creating a plan, then you won't get to that goal. We have to get out of our heads, and I find I talk to people all of the time, and they're like, my content just really, it isn't good enough, or, I'm not that good in front of a camera. Well, I mean, I'm talking to a camera, it's just me in this room alone. But, I know that I have to do it. I have to continuously do it. I have to practice. And when you're doing it repetitively, then you'll find that, you'll get better. You'll get better and better and better. And people aren't judging you anymore about how the content look. And for those who are doing that, shame on them. I mean, what are they doing? We shouldn't be judging, people's content based on, oh, it should have been a little bit brighter. They should have made that transition this way. Who cares? So get out there if you have a talent, because we all have talents, and you have content that you want to deliver to the masses. Do it. I mean, we all have phones. We all have a platform now. It's not like it used to be where we would have to search different areas and reach out for opportunities to be able to speak to crowds. If you have 1,000 followers, imagine standing in front of a crowd of 1,000 people. That's a lot of people. That's a congregation at almost like a mini mega church, if you will. Not a mega church, but, a church, and so an auditorium. So who cares? Grab your phone and record the content. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the trap of feeling like you're not ready. All right. That's a trap. That's a trap. So I don't care if you have, going back to followers, you have 10 followers. That's okay. That's okay. You get out there and you're delivering some quality content. When I mean by quality, I'm not talking about the way it actually looked. I'm talking about some substance. You get out, you're getting in front of a camera and you're talking about things that people really want to hear, things that will help somebody. And some people do pranks, people do, comedy or whatever. Hey, if you think it's going to make people laugh, then do that. So, I've seen people blow up like overnight. I can think of one person in particular had 300 or 400 followers and then had one video go viral. And then before you know it, they're now writing their checks. They're making brand deals with these companies out here. So it doesn't matter, create a plan, like I said, and you have to make yourself do it. You have to make yourself do it. You can say that you're motivated all day long, but until you actually take action, okay, that's when you'll really get one step closer to the goal. And the goal would be, I would imagine, is to, create financial freedom for yourself, where you are doing something that you really enjoy doing. All right, so what does structure do? What does it do for you? So I'm going to read a little bit off here. So structure removes decision making. All right, it also creates automatic behavior. And just to kind of give you an example of that, like a fixed daily routine, it helps you with eliminating excuses. So like I mentioned earlier, if you plan to get up every morning at 5 a.m., and go to the gym, by creating that pattern, you'll find that it'll change your life over time, even if you don't want to do it. And I'll give you an example. I remember years ago, I was talking to this gentleman that one of my customers, actually, this dude was buff, and the guy was like 64 years old. And I was like, man, I said, when are you able to get your workouts in? Because I know you work quite a bit. And he said, man, I get up every morning at 3 a.m. And I'm like, golly, that's early. And so when I told him I really didn't have time to work out, he asked me, what time do you wake up in the morning? And I told him at the time it was 5 a.m. He said, all right, well, how about you get up at 4 a.m.? Sacrifice an hour of your day, the first part of the day. If the back end of your day is too busy and you feel like you just really can't get it in, then sacrifice the first part of the day. And at the time, I started getting up at 4 a.m. I did that for probably 10 years. It wasn't until recently I sort of changed that, but I'm still I still get it in. Sometimes it may not be as early, but I'll make a way to make it happen. All right. So you have to hold yourself accountable and don't make excuses for yourself. Okay, so if that's something that there's something that you really want to accomplish, it doesn't always have to be about creating content. It could be about anything. I'm just focusing on content because I hear a lot of people say that they have ideas, they want to be able to put out content, but they just don't. They can't find that motivation. So the motivation, again, is really just it's an emotional thing. It's a thought. But until you take action, and you create structure for yourself, that's when you'll get one step closer to your goal. So I'm gonna tell you another thing that structure does. It actually builds self-esteem. I often talk about confidence on my channel, and most confident men, and I would say women, I guarantee you, if you pull them aside and you talk to them, there is some structure. There is something that they have or they do in their lives that keep them on a steady schedule. And I guarantee you they hold themselves accountable. You won't catch a confident person slacking in, let's just say, not getting things done that they said they were going to get done. And so a confident person know that, hey, I can confidently say that I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it makes you feel better about yourself. So that's another thing that I would say that having structure definitely helps with your confidence. And, even if you look at, within corporations or even, business owners or entrepreneurs, they all have structure, the ones who are successful in their roles, and the thing is, if they didn't have that, then they wouldn't be successful in what they're doing. So, we shouldn't make excuses for ourselves. We should definitely hold ourselves accountable, and just make it happen. Just make it happen. Some people, they don't really take advantage of the tools that we have today. I mean, we didn't have AI back in the day. And for those of you who aren't or haven't learned how to use AI, I really encourage you to really, do some research on how to make that happen for you, because it'll actually work out. It'll actually help you with your business. It'll help you with even with your content. If you're stuck on kind of what to talk about, if you're stuck on, how you should present some of the material that you have, then it can be used as a personal assistant for you. But you have to input the information on those apps that will give you the best outcomes. You can't just be vague and put little, hey, give me some content. I want to talk about baking cakes. You have to be specific as to what you want the outcome to be. You have to set yourself apart from the next person, because remember, not that competition is a bad thing. Because actually, we're all in competition. It's not in a negative way, but it's a way that there's other people that's doing the same content that I'm doing. But what makes my content different than the next person? That's up to me. That's up to me to make that distinction. I have to be able to say, my information is this way because of this, or I encourage you to do this because this is what it did for me. So the thing is, you have to just go ahead and just make it happen. Utilize the tools that are put before us today, and I guarantee you'll start to build your tribe. You'll start to have people gravitate to the content that you're putting out. So, the thing is, like I said, the key to this really is to just hold yourself accountable and make sure that you have a plan. I tell you, so like for me, in the way I utilize, I'm sorry if I'm all over the place, because I get passionate about this, because, I was one that really struggled with motivation. And until I realized that wasn't the way to go, I had to create some structure. So what I did with AI is, you can tell it to create episodes for you. You can tell it to create talking points, whatever. So they give you talking points, but for me, I like to really just share my experiences. I like to really just kind of freestyle. I don't care if I mess up. I really just want to share with you all the way I use these tools, or share with you whatever message it is I'm trying to bring across. So I encourage you to really do this, and don't get discouraged. I really got to a point where I was discouraged. Like I said, not because I didn't have the content, but it was because I just really didn't feel like doing it. So let's not make excuses for ourselves. Let's make sure that we're consistent. We're creating structure. So how do you build structure? You start small. You start small. You just take it one day at a time. You can hold yourself accountable by saying, you know what, I'm going to film one piece of content every other day. If it's YouTube, you can say, I'm going to do one YouTube video a week. And then when you find yourself having more time to create more and more content, just do it. Just do it. Hold yourself accountable. Like I said, even if you only have 20, 30 followers, it doesn't matter. Just watch how it'll grow just by you being consistent. All right, so that's all I have for you today. I really wanted to just encourage you all to really, focus on structure, and don't be so hard on yourself. Some people have so much talent, and I talk to people daily and I'm like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I hear so many excuses. I used to give the excuses as well. But again, if you're trying to get out of the situations that you're in, it's nobody's fault but yourself. You just have to do it. Find that content that you want to deliver, something that you feel like is fun, something that's pretty easy for you to talk about, and just do it. Some say, hey, oh man, you got the camera equipment, you got this, you got that. These phones today record just as good as the camera that I'm using right now. It's all really about lighting. So just make sure you got your lighting set properly, get you a tripod, and just create the content. Just do it. All right. So I hope you all got something out of this video. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Share it too. Share it for me. Share it for me. It'll help me grow the channel because I'm really trying to do that. And again, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. All right. So once again, for those of you who just joined, never saw any of my content, go check out some of the old content, comment, and let's chat. Let's talk a little bit. All right. Thank you for joining.